Hello and welcome to this short video in which I'll be discussing the latest release of CADfix, CADfix 12 Service Pack 2. The video consists of a few slides and demonstrations outlining several of the key updates to the software. Here we can see a summary of what's new in CADfix 12 SP2. There have been updates across a number of key areas, including import and export interfaces, improvements to existing functionality, and some brand new functionality. The first topic we will discuss is the updates to CAD interface support for both import and export. So CADfix 12 SP2 has updated version support for all the major CAD formats, in addition to a new import and export for glTF, a new DGN import, and a new direct export to CONVERGE CFD. There have also been improvements to IFC and OBJ imports and FBX import and export. When importing a SolidWorks file, users can now scan and select SolidWorks configurations. The image on the right-hand side here shows a SolidWorks assembly file that has been imported at 3 positions, each a separate configuration set up in SolidWorks. And the final point on import and export is there is now a more robust STL export, leading to fewer faceting failures. The next area that we'll take a look at are the changes to the defeaturing tools. So in CADfix 12 SP2, we have improved our holes and protrusion removal tools. We can now remove holes and protrusions with complex caps, so complex exits. As you can see on the right hand side here, there's a couple of holes here that we wouldn't have been able to find in 12 SP 1.1, where the exit hole comes out in multiple faces. And as well as this, we can now remove holes containing protrusions, such as engraved text or engraved lettering. And as you can see on the right here, we have an image comparing the result of removing holes in 12 SP 1.1 and the much improved removal of holes in 12 SP2. So let's take a look at our new and improved hole and protrusion removal tool in CADfix. So we'll start by opening up a model and shading it on screen. And we'll reorient this model so that we can see the holes more clearly. As you can see here, we've got 3 holes, and they're coming out of this L-shaped block, so they have a complex exit face. If we go to our Remove Holes tool, and we'll set the settings to find any, you can see here that we have this new option to include holes with complex caps. So if I don't turn that on and hit find, we'll get the same result that we would get in previous versions of CADfix, which is just this one small through hole here. But if we turn this setting on and hit find, we're now able to find these holes with these complex shaped exits and hit fix, and it will remove these, and we're just left with a standard L-shaped block. So let's look at another example of where the new and improved hole removal tool can be seen. So if I open up this model, and shade it on screen, we can see here that we have sort of a large hole going through this component, but there's a gap. So this isn't a fully complete ring. There's a gap down the side of this hole. So again, this time we'll turn the new improved hole removal complex cap tool on, and we'll hit find. And we're now able to find this complex hole even though there's a gap there, and hit fix, and it's removed that complex hole from the model. So let's have a look at one more model where the new and improved functionality around hole removal can be seen, but this time we're going to be building some bodies from the holes, so from a cavity which has complex exit and entry points. So as you can see, we have our model here, and I'll just quickly shade this model, and then we'll zoom in. We can see here the exit points to a number of different holes, and all these holes are joined up inside a big cavity inside this this single body. So if I go to my tools and go to create bodies from holes, we can see here in our settings, it's very similar to before. So we have this new option for include holes with complex caps. So if I turn this on and hit find, we can see we found the cavity. If we hit fix, we've removed the old body and we now have a solid volume from that cavity in the original body. So that's just another application for this new being able to find holes with complex caps. Moving on to changes to the automated wizard processing. Facet quality checks have now been incorporated into batch processing during export to STL and OBJ. Users can now set checks for folded, zero area, and intersecting facets with the option to raise a warning or to abort the export if a model fails the facet quality checks. So let's have a look at setting up some of these facet quality checks. So here you can see the CADfix interface. We're going to set our target system to either STL or OBJ. Here we'll go for STL. To set the facet quality checks up, we go into our export settings. As you can see at the top here, we've got all our settings for our actual our faceting tolerances, and at the bottom here we can see our facet quality checks. If I click on this option here, we can set the pre-export validation to off, to on but issuing warnings, or to on and abort export. And in this little box here, we can see our facet quality checks for folded facets, zero area facets, and intersecting facets. So here we'll go for abort, hit OK, and we'll save this configuration file for use in a batch conversion of just a couple of models to STL. I've already set up some a batch process, a batch script, so that we can run with that configuration file that we've just saved and process the two models in this folder. So we started the batch process, and as you can see, it's jumping through a few of the steps. So repairing and preparing the STLs, and then it will attempt to export these models to STL. And as you can see, in this first model, we failed to write out the STL. And again, for the second model, we've also failed to write out the STL. So both of these processes have been aborted because we failed some of those facet quality checks that we've set up when setting up our configuration file. Now, if I go back and let's change this, let's change these facet quality checks to issue warnings, and we'll resave this configuration file and run the batch process again. So we'll just save this under a different name, and we'll quickly change our batch script to point out this new configuration file. And again, we'll rerun that same batch script to process those two models, but this time issuing a warning, and we should be able to export the STL file. So again, you can see we're going through the batch process, and this time, when we export the geometry, we have successfully exported the geometry. And again, for the second model this time, we've been able to export the geometry successfully. In the case that we set the facet quality check settings to issue a warning and not to abort the process, we can see that in our folder here we now have two STL files, and in this case we're going to go and look in the log files for those wizard processes. And if we scroll down to the export section of this file, we can see that yes, we've exported an STL, but we have facet quality failures detected, and that the bad geometry has been placed in a set. And similarly, if we look in the robotic arm 3D printer wizard, we can see that we have failed some of the facet quality checks, but we've still managed to export a file. So now we'll go back into CADfix, and let's import one of these FBM files. And we'll change the work and display part to that look set with our failed faces in and redisplay the model. And now we can see the components or the faces in question where we may have facet failures. And we'll be able to go ahead and process this from here to resolve any of those issues. We'll now move on to assemblies. So in CADfix 12 SP2, we can now build assembly structures by instantiating duplicate components based on their underlying geometry and topology. So CADfix can automatically find and instantiate bodies with matching geometry and topology and build flat assembly structures. So now let's take a look at building assembly structures in CADfix. So the first thing we'll do is we'll open up a model and we will quickly shade this on screen. So if we have a look at this model, it's quite clear that there's a number of repeated components going around sort of the axis of this propeller. If I look into the model tree, we can see that there's a number of different bodies making up this model, and we have an individual body for each one of those repeated components. In the bottom right here, we can see that we've got well above 300 bodies comprising this model. If I go into the assembly structure, you can see that there isn't an assembly structure there, but at the top we have this option to create an assembly from the existing bodies. And if I click on this, CADfix will automatically identify repeat components based on their geometry and topology and instantiate them into the flat assembly structure that you can now see here in the assembly tree tab. And now you can see that our model tree has significantly less bodies in. And if I were to make a selection, you can see that here this component has been repeated, or if we just hover over highlight, we can see where each of these components has been instantiated multiple times. And now we have only 53 bodies in the model. So the next area of CADfix that we'll look at is the model tree. So the first thing to note about the model tree is that the transparency attribute has now been added for ease of access, as you can see here on the right hand side. And the second thing to note is there have been improvements to the performance, which now sees faster opening of nodes in the tree, as well as faster restoration of a selection when switching between the model tree and the assembly tree tabs. So we'll now move on to a new piece of functionality that's been integrated into CADfix 12 SP2. So the new piece of functionality, mass property reports, is a HTML or CSV report which basically monitors the changes to a component's mass properties as it is processed using CADfix wizard processing. The user can define pass and fail thresholds to identify cases where deviation in the mass properties, such as the volume, surface area, center of mass, and the moments of inertia, are deemed to be inappropriate. The user can set these up to check the mass properties at each stage in the wizard process. And you can see here on the right hand side an example of the easy to read HTML report for a successful wizard process and one in which the mass properties have gone above the threshold defined by the user. Let's take a look at how we set up our mass property reports in CADfix. So the first thing we need to do is select a model. And what we have to do is set up our wizard process options first. So if I go to the left hand side, we'll turn the transform stage on, and we'll turn all the wizard stages on. And actually, let's, in the transform section, set some of these tools to sort of collapse, join chains of edges and collapse short edges and pin sharp edge angles, just so that we have some changes to the model. Now, if we click on this little arrow by the Save button, we can see an option for setting our mask properties. So, firstly, we can set when we want to calculate the mask properties, so we'll do that after every wizard stage here. At the bottom here, we can select what file format we want our mask property report to be in. So we have an option for CSV or an easy to read HTML. Let's go for the easy to read HTML here. And then on the right hand side in the settings button, we can set our deviation thresholds to see whether we pass or fail the mask property checks. And we can change these for volume, surface area, center of mass, moments of inertia, and zero tolerance. I'll leave those as they are for now. And once we've set all that up, we can run the wizard as normal. And we'll just skip ahead slightly to the end of the wizard processing here. So our export's complete. And now, if we go into our file browser, we will see our new output model. So we started with our step model, and we've exported this JT model here. And here we can see our mask property report with the suffix _MP. And if I open this up, we can see that that has been successful in retaining those mask properties. We've not gone above those tolerances. We can see the tolerances that we've set, and we can see the change in all of those properties between each stage. And on the right hand side, we can see the total deviation for each one of those mask properties that we've decided to record. So that's the end of this short video covering some of the major changes to CADfix 12 SP2. Thank you for listening.